Imagine living in a country where the minimum wage is less than $50 a month and isn't even enough to buy food, where filling up your gas tank costs less than a bottle of water, and where money loses value so quickly that it becomes worthless. Now imagine that this same country has the largest oil reserves on the planet, the highest waterfall in the world, and a beauty, including that of its women, that has fascinated millions of people both inside and outside its borders. A country of paradisiacal beaches, surreal landscapes, and rivers where even urinating can be a mistake. That country exists, and it's called Venezuela. Sit back in your chair, open your eyes wide, and hit the like button, because what you are about to see is unlike anything you have ever been told about Venezuela. You will discover how it got to this point, how a bus driver became president, and what is almost never told about one of the most extraordinary places on Earth. Let's begin. To understand what is happening in Venezuela today, we must start with something very simple: how people live their daily lives. Because it is hard to believe that, in a country with the largest oil reserves on the planet and enormous amounts of gold under its soil, more than 9 million people have had to leave simply to be able to eat. Today, it is estimated that more than 80% of the population lives in poverty, and that for years, millions of Venezuelans have survived on less than $1 a day. The minimum wage became one of the lowest in the world, so low that, at times, it was less than $1 a month for a full-time job. What does that mean in practice? It means that working for a whole month does not guarantee even the most basic necessities. Common foods such as rice, flour, eggs, or medicine could cost more than the entire monthly wage. Living on a single salary was no longer a realistic option. And this is where what some local economists call the urban Orinoco paradox comes in. A country with seemingly infinite resources, but with an economy that never quite reaches the people. To survive, many families began to combine small incomes, aid, informal jobs, or any opportunity that came their way. Salaries ceased to fulfill their most basic function. Even today, despite some changes, the situation is still far from normal. But the continued loss of value of the currency has meant that, in the last months of 2025, those same 130 bolivars are worth less than $50. In some cases, especially among public sector employees, this monthly income is supplemented by government bonuses that can raise incomes to around $160 per month. But these bonuses are not part of the real salary. They do not count towards vacations, pensions, or labor rights, and they do not reach the entire population of the country. To understand the extent to which this affects daily life, a simple example suffices. For many Venezuelans, an entire month's work is not enough to fill a shopping cart. And yet life goes on, adjusting as best it can. This is the Venezuela of the streets and markets of Caracas, of the neighborhoods that climb the hills, and that almost never appear in tourist brochures. But this is where a significant portion of the population lives, where the real life of the country takes place, far from the image that is usually shown to the outside world. And the problems are not limited to wages. There is something that affects everything: inflation. Money is losing value at a rate that is difficult to comprehend. Prices change without warning. Banknotes are no longer useful, and saving in the local currency is pointless. For years, daily life has become a constant exercise in adaptation. People buy only what is essential, exchange what they have, and improvise every day to make ends meet. But this adaptation is not only economic. In many areas of the country, power outages are part of daily life. Electricity can disappear for hours or even days, affecting water, food preservation, and the functioning of hospitals, schools, and small businesses. And yet, Venezuela is a country of extreme contrasts, because even in the midst of blackouts, there is a place where darkness is never total. A place where, ironically, the night lights up again and again, even without electricity. This occurs at Lake Maracaibo, where a phenomenon unique in the world takes place: the Catatumbo lightning. Here, thunderstorms form for hours, night after night, throughout much of the year. Constant lightning illuminates the sky in blue and white, often without loud thunder, visible hundreds of kilometers away, while many cities spend entire nights in darkness. Here, the sky never sleeps. NASA has recognized this area as the global epicenter of thunderstorms, with hundreds of nights of activity per year and more than 1 million lightning strikes annually. An impressive natural spectacle, and at the same time, an almost symbolic contrast to the country's everyday reality. Because while the sky lights up naturally in this corner of Venezuela, much of the country still lacks basic services that are taken for granted in other parts of the world. Internet access, for example, is often slow, unstable, or simply non-existent for long periods of time, limiting study, work, and one of the few ways many people have found to generate income and stay connected to the outside world. That is why, in Venezuela, life is not organized according to what is needed, but according to what is available at any given moment. And yet, what is most striking is not only the difficulties, but how life continues in the midst of them. Families reorganize their day according to daylight hours, people turn their homes into small businesses, and communities or villages help each other to obtain food, medicine, or transportation. And when you understand this reality, the question arises, how did Venezuela get here? Because this country is not poor or lacking in resources, quite the contrary. Venezuela is one of the richest territories on the planet in terms of natural resources. Hidden beneath its soil is such an enormous amount of oil that even today it ranks as the country with the largest reserves in the world. And this wealth did not appear by chance. Millions of years ago, the territory we now know as Venezuela was covered by shallow seas, primitive jungles, and abundant life. Countless life forms lived and died in these ecosystems. Microorganisms, giant plants, dinosaurs, and other prehistoric animals. Over time, their remains were buried under layers of mud and sediment, and when the pressure of the earth combined with the heat of the subsoil, that organic matter was transformed into oil and gas. For millions of years, this process occurred silently, beneath the jungles, rivers, and imposing tepuis of the south of the country. An invisible wealth that some local geologists call, almost ironically, the Marapa effect. Abundance underground, scarcity on the surface. It was not until the early 20th century that humans began to discover it. In areas such as Lake Maracaibo, geologists detected natural seepages of crude oil sprouting from the ground. Those dark spots were the first clue. Subsequent drilling confirmed the unthinkable. Huge deposits lay dormant beneath the jungle, mountains, and rivers. Today, Venezuela has more than 300 billion barrels of oil, enough to supply much of the world for decades. And here the paradox returns. Unlike other oil-rich countries where that wealth translated into well-being for their populations, this was not the case in Venezuela. The money did not translate into lasting prosperity. Between mismanaged decisions, an increasingly fragile economy, hyperinflation, and later, a mass exodus, the country ended up living a reality very different from what its wealth suggested. And yet, Venezuela's wealth does not end with oil. The country also has enormous reserves of natural gas and one of the largest concentrations of gold in Latin America. It is no coincidence that during the era of conquest, these lands fueled one of the most powerful myths in history, El Dorado. Convinced that a city of gold was hidden in this region of the planet, generations of explorers ventured into impenetrable jungles, endless rivers, and unknown territories. Many never returned. Some disappeared in the Venezuelan Amazon. Others were lost in the Orinoco Delta, a labyrinth of water and jungle where life follows a completely different rhythm from that of the modern world. Even the country's name itself seems to have been born out of that early European fascination with these lands. When Amerigo Vespucci, the Italian navigator and explorer whose name would end up giving identity to an entire continent, traveled through the Lake Maracaibo area at the end of the 15th century, he encountered something unexpected: indigenous dwellings built on the water, supported by stilts. That image reminded him of Venice, That is why he called those lands Venezuela, meaning Little Venice. Over time, that name was transformed into the one we know today, Venezuela. And here begins the other part of the story, a part that very few imagine. A recent history linked to a time when Venezuela seemed to have it all: power, money, and seemingly inexhaustible resources. It is a story of key decisions, of poorly managed wealth, of a death that changed everything, of a bus driver who ended up becoming president, and of a woman who, decades later, would become one of the country's best-known names in the world. For years, Venezuela was ruled by a figure who left his mark on everything. His name was Hugo Chavez. It was a period when a lot of money came in, mainly thanks to oil, and when millions of Venezuelans felt that, at last, the country could change. But it was also a period in which decisions were made that, over time, would come at a very high cost. It was assumed that the income would never end, and many problems were hidden while the money kept coming in. When Hugo Chavez died at the age of 58, Venezuela was not prepared for what came next. The succession was tense, confusing, and full of uncertainty. And in that context, a man virtually unknown to much of the world went from being a bus driver and union leader to occupying the most powerful position in the country. His name was Nicolas Maduro. He did not come from the elites or from a long traditional political career. Before becoming president, he had worked in the Caracas metro and had been politically educated on the streets in everyday life. At first, many Venezuelans saw him as someone they could relate to, but the context had already changed. Incomes had fallen, accumulated imbalances were beginning to surface, and the economic model was showing clear signs of exhaustion. The decisions made in those early years pushed the country into a deep crisis, the consequences of which are still being felt today. And among all of them, there was one that changed everything. Millions of Venezuelans began to leave the country. Entire families, young people, professionals, and the elderly left their lives behind. Venezuela became the scene of one of the largest exoduses in recent Western history. Meanwhile, at the other end of this story, a very different figure began to gain prominence. A woman known for her direct speech and firm stance, who over time became a symbol for many Venezuelans inside and outside the country. Her name began to appear more and more in the international media, until Venezuela was once again the center of world attention. Within this cultural mix and these origins, there is a fact that has traveled the world for decades, also associated with the beauty of this country. Venezuela is the country that has won the most international beauty contests in history, more titles than any other country on the planet. For many, this fame can be explained by the mix of European, indigenous, and African origins, and by a culture where image and personal care have always played an important role. And now we want to ask you something. Do you think Venezuelan women are the most beautiful in the world? Or do you think that the women in your country, or any other you know, are just as beautiful? Leave us your opinion in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. As you can see, Venezuela is full of beauty and sits on one of the greatest geological fortunes ever known. And that is precisely why its current reality is so difficult to understand. The problem was not the resources or their beauty. The problem was that when money moves faster than goods, something breaks. At first, it's hardly noticeable. Then you feel it, until money ceases to serve its original purpose, which is to buy things. This is called inflation, and when it gets completely out of control, we talk about hyperinflation. In Venezuela, hyperinflation began to become evident when the state started spending much more money than it was actually bringing in, and decided to cover the difference by printing more and more banknotes. On paper, it seemed like a quick fix, but in real life, it was the beginning of a silent disaster. To understand it simply, imagine this. If there are 10 banknotes and 10 products in a country, each product would cost a single banknote. Now imagine that the products are still the same 10, but suddenly there are 100 bills in circulation instead of 10 because the country is printing more money. The products don't multiply. The only thing that goes up is the price. That same product that used to cost 1 bill now costs 10. Not because it's better, but because there is much more money for the same things. When that process is repeated over and over again, money loses value. Each bill is worth less, even if you have more in your pocket. That is exactly what happened in Venezuela. Prices changed so quickly that saving no longer made sense. Hoarding bills was useless. To put it in perspective, there was a time when $1 was worth 4 bolivars. At the worst point of inflation, a single dollar cost more than 1,000,000 bolivars. The result was devastating for the people of Venezuela. To buy something as basic as bread, many people needed bags or even suitcases full of bills. A product that cost 10 bolivars one day could cost thousands the next day and millions the following month. Not because it had changed, but because money was losing value at a brutal rate. The national currency plummeted against the dollar. The problem was no longer the price of things, but that money had ceased to serve as a reference. There were images that were difficult to forget. People carrying entire bags of bills to buy basic foodstuffs. When a society reaches that point, money ceases to be a help and becomes another obstacle to survival. Hyperinflation did not only affect food. Everything began to rise: transportation, electricity, basic services. Salaries, on the other hand, lagged behind. Working an entire month no longer guaranteed a minimum income. Today, the official exchange rate is around 300 bolivars per dollar. The minimum monthly wage remains at 130 bolivars, which is less than half a dollar a month. With that income, it is impossible for a person to cover their needs unless they have other sources of income. As a result, saving bolivars no longer made sense, and many people began to save in dollars, euros, durable goods, or anything else that retained some value. Transportation also became a challenge. A ticket that used to cost very little now required thousands or millions, forcing many to walk long distances or share rides. And one of the most striking images of that period sums it all up. For years in Venezuela, filling up a gas tank could cost less than buying a bottle of water. A country with oil to spare, but with money that was now worthless. It was in this context that Venezuela entered a decisive stage. The problems did not appear overnight. They had been brewing for years during a period when the country was receiving enormous revenues from oil and seemed to have room for everything. Under the leadership of Hugo Chavez, a model was implemented with strong state control, extensive social programs, and an increasing dependence on oil. But at the same time, imbalances accumulated that left the country highly exposed to any change. After Chavez's death, Nicolás Maduro came to power in a much more fragile scenario. Revenues began to fall, internal and external pressure increased, and an already weakened model began to crumble rapidly. Problems that had been brewing for some time accelerated in a very short time. It was during this period that existing inflation spiraled completely out of control, especially from the mid-2000s onwards. The value of money began to plummet at an unprecedented rate, pushing the country into a deep and prolonged crisis. In this context, another key figure in power began to gain influence: Delcy Rodriguez. A lawyer by training with a long career in government, she held strategic positions and was one of the most influential people in the country's administration. And when work is no longer enough to live on, the question is no longer how to endure, but how much longer one can resist. That was when millions of people made the hardest decision of all: to leave. Families separated, young people who left alone, parents who sent their children first, professionals who left entire careers behind to start from scratch in another country. This is how one of the largest exoduses in recent Western history took shape, a phenomenon that transformed Venezuela and much of Latin America. At the same time, both inside and outside the country, critical voices and figures representing an alternative for many Venezuelans began to gain visibility. Among them was Maria Corina Machado, whose insistence on institutional reforms and a peaceful solution to the crisis earned her a Nobel Peace Prize, an international recognition that once again placed Venezuela at the center of the world's attention. In early 2026, following the arrest of President Nicolas Maduro during an international military operation, Delcy Rodriguez assumed the interim presidency of Venezuela to ensure the continuity of the state amid the crisis. No one knows for sure what will happen in Venezuela's future, or how this complex stage in its history will be resolved. Perhaps things will change. Perhaps new figures will come to power. Perhaps names such as Maria Corina Machado will end up playing a central role in the country's future. But beyond who governs, what really matters is something else. That Venezuelans can finally enjoy the wealth of their own land. That millions of people who were forced to leave can return home. That living, working, and raising a family in Venezuela becomes a real possibility again. That is the wish of many, and also ours here at Uncensored World. Today, this story is based on three elements that are constantly intertwined: a severely damaged economy, a power that remains in the midst of crisis, and millions of people forced to leave in search of opportunities. Now, to understand the extent to which all this has changed the country, and how it continues to affect both those who stayed and those who left, it is necessary to pause for a moment and take a closer look at the phenomenon that has marked an entire generation: exile. Before continuing with this journey, understanding Venezuelan exile, discovering the highest waterfall on the planet, and whether it will soon be possible to travel around Venezuela and its beauty, let me tell you something in 10 seconds. Many people don't know this, but less than 1 in 100 people who watch these videos are subscribed. And that means that many are missing out on these stories and ways of understanding the world that don't appear anywhere else. Behind our documentaries are hours of research, fact-checking, and telling the truth without filters. So if this content brings you something, if you like to understand the world as it is, subscribe now to Uncensored World. That way you won't miss the next trip. It will be a pleasure to have you with us. Returning to Venezuela and what exile has meant, there is something fundamental that needs to be understood. Very few people really know everything this country has been through in recent years. From the outside, Venezuela is often reduced to headlines, figures, or distant debates. But the people who can best explain this story are the Venezuelans themselves. Those who stayed and those who, unfortunately, were forced to leave. Because when working no longer guarantees food, when starting a family becomes almost impossible, leaving is no longer a choice but a necessity. Thus began one of the largest migratory movements in recent Western history. According to international estimates, more than 7 million Venezuelans have left the country. This is a huge number for a country in peacetime, and it is probably even higher if unregistered departures are counted. But this exodus had many faces. Young people who no longer saw a future left. Professionals who had to start from scratch. Entire families seeking something as simple as a dignified life. Parents who sent their children away first. And elderly people who, for the first time, had to leave their homes behind and suffer the pain of saying goodbye, often for the last time, to their homeland, friends, and family. The reasons varied, but the final push was usually the same. For many, it was the economy, insufficient wages, constant inflation, and an increasingly unsustainable life. For others, insecurity and lack of opportunities were added to the mix. And in some cases, something even harder appeared: fear. Fear of speaking out, of disagreeing, or of not aligning oneself with those in power. Thus, political exile was also born. The result was clear: an entire country rich in resources began to empty out. This exodus not only transformed Venezuela, but also many countries in the region, which in a short time received millions of Venezuelans seeking to start over. Meanwhile, those who stayed behind had to learn to live in a different country, a country of absences, where almost every family had someone far away, and where video calls replaced hugs and goodbyes that were never planned. But Venezuela did not disappear. It remained alive. Millions of people remained in the country, some because they could not leave, others because they did not want to, and many because they had no other choice. And life did not stop. It transformed. Money sent from abroad became a lifeline for many families. Dollars, euros, or other currencies became the real benchmark for everyday life. In many homes, those remittances made the difference between eating and not eating. At the same time, the informal economy grew. Small improvised businesses, sales on social media, jobs paid in cash, in other currencies, or even in cryptocurrencies. Creative solutions to constant problems. When there was internet, it became an escape route. For some, it was a way to work. For others, simply a way to not feel completely isolated. And something else emerged that does not appear in the statistics. Solidarity. Neighbors sharing food, medicine, or information. People who, even though they had little, helped those who had less. A reality that has demonstrated something very clear. Even in the hardest times, human beings are capable of adapting and moving forward. And at this point, with everything that is happening around Venezuela, and with the news that once again puts the country at the center of world attention, it is the best time to ask yourself, what do you think of Venezuela and its people? Do you think things will soon improve in this fascinating country? Or do you think there is still a long way to go? What do you think about what is happening? If you are Venezuelan, if you have lived in Venezuela, or if you have family or friends in the country, it would be great if you could share your thoughts in the comments, as no one better than those who know this reality firsthand can help the rest of the world truly understand it. If you are not Venezuelan, please also tell us if you would like to visit Venezuela if the situation improved, or what would make you hesitate to do so today. Because Venezuela is not just about crisis and difficulties. It is also about nature, culture, and places that seem unreal. And now we are going to discover those wonders that are hardly ever talked about, and how one day they could reopen to the world. To begin with, you will now discover one of the most amazing adventure stories on the planet, linked to the beauty of Venezuela and its most famous waterfall, Angel Falls. We are talking about the highest waterfall in the world, so high that, before hitting the ground, much of the water turns into mist and disappears into the air. Because of its name, many think it has a religious or legendary origin. It sounds logical, but the reality is very different and much more curious. In the 1930s, an American pilot named Jimmy Angel was flying over southern Venezuela. He wasn't looking for miracles or angels. He was looking for gold, hidden veins in the middle of the jungle, among the imposing tepuis, huge flat-topped plateaus that seemed to come from another world. These geological formations, unique on the planet, rise like islands above the jungle. Their peaks, often covered by clouds, have remained almost intact for millions of years, creating ecosystems that exist nowhere else. During one of those flights, Jimmy saw something that took his breath away. From the top of Ollantaytambo, an entire river plunged into the void in an endless fall. Fascinated, he made an extreme decision to try to land his plane on the top of that tepue. But the result was a disaster. The plane got stuck in the mud, rendered useless, in a virtually inaccessible place. Jimmy, his wife, and 2 companions were isolated for 11 days, surrounded by jungle, swamps, and cliffs, not knowing if they would make it out alive. Finally, they descended the high tepui and returned to tell what they had seen. That experience, which could have ended in tragedy, became legendary. Over time, that waterfall became known in the West as Angel Falls, not for religious reasons, but in honor of Jimmy Angel, the pilot who made it known to much of the world almost by accident. For the indigenous peoples, however, it always had another name, Karapakupai Meru, the jump from the deepest place. A reminder that this wonder existed long before it appeared on maps. Jimmy never found the gold he was looking for, but he left humanity a much greater treasure. The highest waterfall on the planet, with a drop of 976 meters. Getting to Angel Falls is still difficult. It requires days of traveling through jungles and rivers, but those who have seen it agree on one thing: the effort is worth it. The The water falls from such a height that it seems to vanish into the air, enveloping the landscape in a constant, almost unreal mist. But this is only the beginning, because the adventure in Venezuela does not end here. Beyond Angel Falls, there is a place that sums up Venezuela's natural beauty like few others, the Gran Sabana. For many travelers, it is the country's great unfulfilled dream, a territory so ancient and wild that it is hard to believe it exists in our time. Here rise the famous tepuis, giant flat-topped mountains that look as if they have been cut with a knife and emerge from the jungle like authentic islands of stone. The landscapes are so unreal that they look like something out of a science fiction movie. Among them, Mount Roraima stands out as one of the most impressive tepuis on the planet. Its shape, isolation, and mystery were so striking that they inspired writer Arthur Conan Doyle to create The Lost World, a story in which he imagined South American plateaus where prehistoric creatures could still exist. And you only need to see Roraima from the air to understand why. The Venezuelan tepuis look like floating islands, with peaks rising above the clouds and landscapes that defy all logic. It's not just a beautiful place, it's a place that makes you feel small. If we descend further south, we enter one of the most extreme and unknown territories in the country, the Venezuelan Amazon, one of the most biodiverse regions on the planet. Dense jungles, endless rivers, and wildlife as spectacular as it is unpredictable. This is home to jaguars, pink dolphins, macaws, anacondas, and species that exist nowhere else in the world. But it is also home to indigenous peoples who have very limited contact with the outside world, communities that maintain ways of life similar to those of hundreds or even thousands of years ago. Tribes such as the Yanomami continue to live in small communities in the heart of the jungle, basing their daily lives on hunting, fishing, gathering, and a deep knowledge of the nature that surrounds them. For them, the jungle is not a hostile environment, but their home, their pharmacy, their pantry, and their memory. Among the animal treasures of this region are the capybara, the world's largest rodent, which can weigh over 60 kilograms, and the green anaconda, considered the largest snake on the planet, capable of reaching up to 12 meters in length. And as with Venezuela itself, this beautiful yet extreme natural environment also has its harsh side. A constant reminder that life here demands respect, caution, and adaptation. We are coming to the end of this journey, and amid so much beauty appears one of the most disturbing stories of the Amazon, the candiru. This tiny fish, which inhabits the Amazonian rivers of Venezuela and Brazil, is known for causing one of the most intense pains imaginable. It is attracted to the urea present in urine. This means that if a person urinates directly into these waters, the candiru can detect the flow and enter the urethra, causing extreme pain due to its small spines. That is why the local inhabitants are well aware of the warning. Avoid urinating in the water. Although cases are extremely rare, its reputation has generated an almost legendary respect throughout the region. With all this in mind, we would like to ask you, would you dare to swim in these waters? As you can see, even in its nature, Venezuela is a country of extreme contrasts, absolute beauty, and dangers that demand respect. We are coming to the end of this journey, and with the hope that the situation will improve and that one day the world will be able to rediscover this country up close, it is inevitable to imagine what it would be like to visit Venezuela when conditions allow. Venezuela is a huge and deeply diverse country. While millions of people are concentrated in large cities such as Caracas or Maracaibo, large areas of the south remain almost untouched, covered by jungles, rivers, and territories where indigenous communities still live, with very little contact with the outside world. For decades, the country was an accessible destination for international travelers. In a scenario of greater stability, something that many hope for, it would be again. Air connections, tourism, and the possibility of traveling around the country normally could return over time. For those arriving with foreign currency, the cost of living is usually low compared to Europe or North America. Eating out, staying in hotels, and getting around can be relatively inexpensive. But this reality coexists with a much harsher situation for the local population, so any reopening to tourism would have to be accompanied by respect and awareness. And if there is one thing that makes those who think of Venezuela dream, it is its natural wonders. Angel Falls, the highest waterfall on the planet, the Gran Sabana and its impossible tepuis, the Amazon, with dense jungles, endless rivers, and biodiversity that is difficult to imagine. No one knows what will happen to Venezuela in the coming years, nor who will govern, nor how it will change course. But one thing is clear: this country cannot be understood solely from the figures or the headlines. It can be understood by looking at its people, its land, and everything that still hopes to rise again. That is Venezuela. And that is why we had to tell this story from Uncensored World. If this journey has given you something, leave us a like and your comment. It's not an empty gesture. It's the most direct way to support these documentaries and help us continue telling stories that almost no one stops to explain. This channel is not for everyone. Only a small portion of those who watch these videos are part of our community, and that makes all the difference. If you don't subscribe now, it's very likely that the next journey won't appear to you again. YouTube doesn't usually show this type of content unless you ask for it. And before you go, don't stop here. The next video continues this journey and takes you to another of the most mysterious and fascinating places on the planet. Click on it and I'll see you there.